Hello, my name is
And
Irem.
I'm Vivien, and we want to welcome you to our podcast about the Youth for Energy program 2025.
But first, we would like to make some introduction of the program. It's a three-national program for young people from Germany, France, and Italy. The study trip where local sites and stakeholders are visited to explore the diversity of socio-economic contexts that need to be taken into account in the sustainable transformation process of the energy sector.
It's organized by the Paris office of the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, the Green Political Foundation in Germany, and Virage Énergie, a French NGO advising political actors on the topic of energy transition. We asked Sarah from Virage Énergie and Benjamin from the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung to share their expectations.
I'm Benjamin Fishman. I'm the program coordinator for Italy at the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, and it's been 4 or 5 months since we started crafting this year's edition of the Youth for Energy Futures together with Barbara, Sarah, and Rebecca. And I'm really thrilled to the next days to come. I'm sure it will be great as the participants. They all seem very nice, and I'm really looking forward to it.
So my expectations for the program is first and foremost for everyone from Italy and Germany and France to learn a lot of things and to have a good time with each other, because we hope you learn from the other participants and also from the meetings we organized for you.
As you've heard, they put a lot of work into this, and it's not the first time they organized it. This year's actually the third edition. Earlier programs, like the first one, included the focus on the energy transition in the industrial sector. This was in 2022 and 2023. 2024, the focus was on energy transition in the mobility sector.
And this year, we will be covering energy transition and gender equality. Let's start with a question. Have you ever thought about the connection between energy and gender? When we talk about the energy transition, it's easy to focus on just technical aspects, but there is much more to it. The social dimension is important.
If this is new to you or you haven't explored it fully, that's okay. We spent a whole week diving deep into this topic, and we can't wait to share what we've discovered. So stay with us as we explore the story behind the numbers and the people behind the change.
For the earlier editions, the connection is clear on the first glance. However, this year it may not be immediately visible. How are these topics related, and why should we pay attention to the connection? We'll be guiding questions for this week and our 2 episodes.
The connection between energy and gender is still a new one. It's not often discussed outside of academia yet, and there are not many lived examples. So if you want to find out more about the connection of gender and energy in practice, you should continue listening to this podcast.
We will take you on a journey of 2 episodes in order to give you an impression of the program and an overview about the topic. So this podcast will guide you through the week, but also through the connection of these topics. My name is Irem, I am 26 years old and I'm the co-founder of Italian Association 350 Sicilia.
And I'm Vivien, 23, from Germany, studying environmental and sustainability studies with political science as my minor, and I'm a climate justice activist. And we two are the team for the Freiburg episode. Now the team for the Strasbourg episode will also introduce themselves.
Hi, this is Carlotta. I am 28 and from Germany. I'm studying a master's program called Sustainability Society in the Environment, and I'm writing my thesis on the interconnection of energy justice and gender equality in energy cooperatives.
Hi, my name is Caterina. I'm 28 and I'm Italian, and I'm studying journalism.
Together we created these 2 episodes, collected impressions from our trip, interviewed the inspiring people we met, and reflected on what we learned.
And it's Sunday afternoon. We have just arrived in Freiburg, getting to know each other. To get a first start into the topic, we, participants, prepared country presentations. What were the most important points you took away from these short insights, Vivien?
So, during these presentations, the differences between the energy transitions in Germany, France, and Italy were emphasized. So, for Germany, the thing I took away was that more than 50% of the overall electricity is produced from renewable energy sources. But for consumption, Germany is still very dependent on the import of fossil fuels. For France, in contrast, the system is very centralized, and it is still very dependent on nuclear energy. For Italy, the most interesting part for me was that there's a clear north and south divide. This regards economic and energy issues, but also social issues.
Thank you, Vivien. Over some pizza, we talked about what we hope to learn and experience this week. Let's hear what Jen was expecting.
I already worked quite a lot about climate and energy, and I was very interested by the subject of this week because I never had any gender considerations when thinking about the topic of energy transition. And so I'm looking forward to make the link between the two topics and meet interesting people, listen to interesting speakers, discover interesting cities. So I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, that was phrased perfectly, what this week is all about. So let's just dive into it. So, Monday was our first full day in Freiburg, and we looked forward to some exciting visits. On our way to our first stop, we took a short walk through the crisp autumn air, the streets full of colorful leaves.
Unfortunately, we only had very little time for a short walk through the district Vauban. The neighborhood is partly self-managed and largely built in an environmentally friendly way, and is mostly car-free. As Lisa, a close friend of mine, grew up there, I asked her for some impressions on how she experienced the energy situation and living in Vauban as a kid.
So growing up in Vauban as a kid was quite fun. There were so many other children with who I could play, like either my neighbors, where we just played in our community garden, or also all the friends were reachable within a maximum of 5 minutes by bike. And as it's quite a safe environment also to cycle because of low car traffic, I could go there like to my friends or also to school from a very young age on already independently, which was really nice. And I also enjoyed all the green spaces and the district, like all the big playgrounds, but also the access to nature, which is close by, like the local mountain and the little river, which was nice. And then there was also a lot of events organized by neighborhood communities, by the district organization itself, like flea markets and so on, which made it quite enjoyable to grow up there. And then on energy transitions, so I grew up close to the heat plants in Vauban, so I always had this awareness where our energy comes from, or our heating energy. But I also had some friends that did not heat at all. Like one of my best friends, they lived in a passive house, so they just never heated, which was quite amazing because it was just so nicely insulated. But then when I grew older, I also realized, of course, some challenges in the district. Not everything is just perfect. For example, our roof does not have PV, like photovoltaics, installed on it because of some architectural challenges. And then also the heating plant uses fossil fuel gas. So also, like, it also uses wood, but it also uses gas. So I think there still remain some challenges, even though Vauban probably being a front runner in like PV installations and also installations of homes.
This gives you a first impression about the Öko-Institut, which is located in this neighborhood, and where we had our first meeting. It is an independent, non-profit environmental research and consultancy institute based in Freiburg, Germany. Irem, can you talk me through it? What is the Öko-Institut all about?
Yes, definitely. So the institute was founded in 1977, emerging from the anti-nuclear movement. It now has additional offices in Darmstadt and Berlin. The institute works across a broad range of environmental and sustainability topics, including energy and climate, chemicals and technology assessments, mobility, resources and consumption, nuclear and safety, as well as environmental law and governance. During our visit, we talked about how gender intersects with energy and climate issues. We met Tanja Kankman, who is a senior researcher at Oeke Institute. She made an important point. Women are hit hardest by rising energy costs because they're overrepresented in low-income and single-person households. If energy programs aren't designed carefully, they can actually make these inequalities even worse.
This really shows how impactful the energy-gender connection is. Could you explain why women are overrepresented in low-income and single-person households?
First, a lot of this comes down to long-standing structural issues. Women still earn less on average, not just because of pay gaps, but because so many end up doing unpaid care work. Childcare, looking after elderly family members, running a household. All of this limits how much paid work they can take on. You know how it goes. Fewer full-time jobs, more part-time or unstable work, less career progression. Then there is the household structure itself. Women are overrepresented in single-person households for several reasons. They live longer than men, so many older women end up living alone after a partner passes away. Women also make up the majority of single parents, usually single mothers, and that comes with serious constraints, managing everything on one income, limited time for higher pay or longer hour jobs, juggling care responsibilities on top of it all. And when you combine lower income with living alone, the impact of energy inflation becomes much heavier, doesn't it? Single-person households do not get to split utility bills, for example. Every fixed cost, heating, electricity, gas, falls entirely on one person. So the per capita costs are higher by default. And for single mothers or widowed women, that weight becomes even heavier. And the result is something researchers now call a gender heating gap across almost all age groups, regions. Women end up spending a higher share of their income on heating and basic energy needs, but not because they use more, but because the system around them makes energy more expensive for them relative to what they earn.
Wow, this sounds really complex. And how can we address this issue?
Well, Germany does have policies to help low-income households, but right now there aren't any measures specifically aimed at women. Tanja suggested that improving existing support like municipal help with heating costs could go a long way in protecting vulnerable groups from energy poverty. We also talked about how to get more people involved in energy transition projects like community wind or solar initiatives. One of the main challenges in making sure low-income households can actually participate. Tanja Kankman pointed out that while the EU has a solid governance framework pushing countries toward climate neutrality, the social side of the transition is still uneven. The barriers aren't always technical, they're structural. It's about how participation models are designed and whether the systems are transparent and accessible.
This seems very important, but also with many challenges. How can we reduce these barriers?
Let's see what Tanja said about the accessibility of energy associations.
That's a very important question, in my opinion, to increase the acceptance of the climate and energy transformation. But we are still in the beginning in this field. There are some examples already how to enable low-income households to financially participate in energy projects such as wind or photovoltaic projects. In Germany, it becomes more important according to the building of district heating networks. We talk about the question who has to pay for it. So if low-income households get shares of an energy association, somebody has to pay for these shares in the beginning. And this is, I think, the main question, who can do this? and we have solidary solutions where the other members of the Energy Association pay for the ones with the lower income in the beginning. Later, the low-income households pay back over the return of investment that they get. Yeah, but we're still in the beginning. There are quite a few ideas, but we still have to find out which one will work and which role the energy associations can play in this field, which role can the municipalities play, how can they support this participation, and so on. But we're still at the beginning.
Tanya shared some promising solutions like solidarity-based financing models. In these setups, wealthier members provide the upfront investment, and low-income participants pay their share gradually from the project's returns. But she also stressed the importance of strong monitoring and governance. Without systems to track who benefits, where emissions are reduced, and how decisions are made, energy projects risk reinforcing existing inequalities. And municipalities and energy associations have a key role here, not just in enabling participation, but in keeping the process transparent and inclusive.
So, what was your takeaway from this conversation with Tanya Kingman?
My takeaway, the energy transition isn't just about technology or policy, but it succeeds depends on people, fairness, and the credibility of the systems guiding it. Making sure no one gets left behind means designing financial and governance in ways that truly empower communities, especially those who've historically been left out of energy initiatives.
This first meeting was really a great introduction to the topic. Thank you for sharing your highlights with us, Irene.
One of my personal highlights was the opportunity to visit the Solar Energy Systems Institute, Fraunhofer. With more than 1,300 employees, it is one of the world's largest solar research institutes. They conduct research in 4 key areas: the generation, distribution, storage, and utilization of energy. Vivien, what impressed you most about the research at Fraunhofer?
There's a lot of cutting-edge research happening there, but the projects that stuck most with me were the creative approaches on how to integrate solar power plants into our environment. This can look like solar bike lanes, exploring the possibilities of combining PV with vineyards and agriculture, and even using floating solar panels as a heat reducer on lakes.
Oh, this sounds like very creative solutions. But we were not only there to talk about technical development, were we?
No, we were there to talk to Anna Heimsath, the head of department for the analysis of modules and power plants, and Dr. Saskia Kühnhold-Pospischil, who is the advisor to the institute management. Together with 3 other colleagues, they won the Best Chance Award in 2024, which recognizes outstanding initiatives that promote equal opportunities at one of its institutes.
For what work did they receive this award?
In 2022, the awardees joined forces to implement a gender-balanced distribution of votes in the Institute's management committee.
So what did they actually do?
They introduced numeric targets for the percentage of scientists and leaders. Here it was important to have the Institute leadership backing this goal, but for the execution, the role of the recruiters is essential as well. Additionally, they introduced bias training as well as leadership concepts like tandems that enable more equality. It was also important to offer part-time jobs and home office options, as well as the scholarship of the Fraunhofer Institute.
So what change did they achieve?
Before their initiative, there were no women in the division and institute leadership. Now it's at 40%, and an additional representative of women's interests in the leaders' meeting.
This is so huge. So what are they still working on? What challenges do they face?
While the leadership goal was reached, it is not reached for all scientists in the different divisions. They mentioned that it is especially hard to get women to join if they are not already 1 or 2 in the team. They also highlighted that to spread this development more, Actors like funding agencies and the leadership in the industry need to get on board as well, to spread awareness and introduce quotas. Lastly, they are also starting to work on other issues of representation and try to tackle this issue intersectional.
So lots of progress, but also still a lot to do. After our conversation, we were also given an exclusive tour. It was excellent to see such advanced and ambitious technology go hand in hand with inclusion and women's leadership. And I couldn't stop asking myself, can we implement the same strategy elsewhere? The same structure and the same vision?
Yes, and we learned how technical transformation cannot be separated from social justice. Because who gets to lead, who participates, and who benefits from the transition matters just as much as the technology itself.
As we walked through the city of Freiburg, we saw the Freiburger Bächle, small water-filled runnels which can be seen along most streets and alleyways in the old city. They are one of the city's most famous landmarks. According to a legend from the Baden region, anybody who accidentally steps into the Bächle on a visit to Freiburg will inevitably marry a Freiburg citizen. But we continued with dry feet to the old city hall for our next meeting.
And there we were welcomed by Sandra Pfeiffer, who is the project lead and a trained adult educator of the project Klimahelden im Handwerk, Climate Heroines in the Crafts. It's a project organized by the city of Freiburg. So Vivien, what did we discuss with Sandra?
So we talked about the importance of not only focusing on academics, but also more practical and manual jobs. Manual labor is very much necessary for the implementation of climate goals. Without crafts, there's no climate protection and no climate action. But there's a shortage of workers in the crafts fields overall, but also specifically in the fields regarding the climate crisis and energy transition. The specific fields that were mentioned are for building renovations and the renewable energy sector. But also there's a major lack of representation of women in this field. The project specifically focuses on young women starting an apprenticeship in the field, which are especially underrepresented. In 2024, in Freiburg, only 1.4% of apprentices in the renovation, heating and climate field were women.
So what is their goal with this project?
Their goal is to engage women, especially young women, in climate-relevant crafts professions, to advance climate protection. But it's not only too important to engage them, but also to increase retention and their long-term career growth. This is why it's so important, especially to create lasting structures.
We also asked Sandra about the vision for her work.
So the vision that drives us is interested girls and young women should find multiple entry points into the crafts, experience networking, visibility and appreciation, and actively shape an open, equal and inclusive crafts culture.
She also mentioned that the choice of the field one wants to work in should not be limited by stereotypes.
Yes, exactly. That's why there's a need for a cultural change overall in the crafts. At the moment, it's still a very conservative field. Even as simple things like not having calendars with pictures of naked women at the workplace is always a given.
What's the status for the project?
Let's hear what Sandra said.
So in the first phase, we contact them directly through vocational schools or through social media and ask for interviews. So we talked with them one-on-one. And right now we're planning a kick-off event in March 26 to bring them all together and talk about their work, their everyday life, their rights, and we hope that that's the beginning of a regular network.
She also mentioned that they are currently trying to connect women in apprenticeship with female role models already working in the field.
Yes, this is so important. Having a role model and a support network can change everything. Are there reactions from the other actors in the city? How is the project perceived?
As the biggest success, she mentioned bringing together council members, craft industry business owners, and women working in the field with climate change initiatives.
That we recognize we all have the same goal. We want to do something for the climate protection. We can see the potential of women in crafts.
But there's also more awareness in the craft field. Many changes are necessary for climate protection, and this project could be a big step forward. As is a project so close to her heart, she mentioned the following.
And feeling this power of synergies and networking and following the same goal together.
But let's also put this into perspective. Although this is such an important project, according to Dusandra, it seems to be a pioneering example. So we have a question for you. Do you by any chance know similar projects which might want to exchange ideas and strategies? On Tuesday, we visited the model project Stadt and Frau, an architectural pilot project including women's perspective in residential building and neighborhood planning.
So why are we talking about a building project?
Because in our meeting with Oke Institute, the gender heating gap was highlighted, remember? And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to also talk about the building sector. We met up with architect Ingeborg Thor-Klauser and the flat owner and inhabitant Günther. So I want to ask you, Vivien, why and how did this project start?
So it's located in Rieselfeld, an urban extension area of the 90s. There was need for more living space, and they wanted to create the space with lots of participation. In 1990, the working group Stadt und Frau, City and Women, was founded. Let's hear from the architect herself in German. We will give you an English summary after this short clip.
Ja, ich bin Ingeborg Thor-Klauser. Ich bin Architektin. Ich bin aber auch Familienmutter. Und in den 90er Jahren begann dieser Workshop Stadt und Frau als Initiative. Und da ich ja als Familienfrau und Familienmutter damit konfrontiert sind, wie ich lebe, wir haben damals auch noch nichts Eigenes gehabt, sondern in Miete. Und daher hat mich das Thema sehr interessiert. Wie sehe ich das Wohnen aus Frauensicht und was kann ich damit reingeben?
So Ingeborg Thor-Klauser is an architect and a mother. And when the workshop in the 90s started, she was very interested to contribute her own experience as a renter, a mother, an architect, and a woman.
How was their process then?
So first, they created a criteria list based on women's needs. Then, they created political demands and started their enforcement of the project. In 1995, a group of women architects received the planning contract for the buildings 1 and 2. And they created an architectural competition with women especially encouraged to participate. In 2001, the last building is finished.
Why can it be considered as a feminist planning?
So one aspect is their target group and the inclusive focus. The project is aimed at women living alone, single mothers, co-parenting parents, and individuals or families seeking a neighborhoodly community and a balance between work and family life. But it's also considered feminist planning because of the participatory planning and the female architects. The project was developed through an architectural competition and a participatory planning process led by female architects.
Wow! And what about the architectural design itself?
So there are many different aspects they considered, but the next two were especially highlighted by the architect. So there is the flexible apartment design. The apartments feature a flexible layout with connecting rooms that allow enlargement or subdivision, offering differentiated sizes and accessibility for diverse and changing needs. For example, if your children move out or your family situation changes. This affects especially cities, as the space there is very limited, so it's important to only be able to use as much as you actually need. But also for the aspects like heating and for the amount of your rent, this is a very positive feature. Another aspect she highlighted is the semi-public design. It integrates industrial spaces for neighborhood interaction.
That's very interesting. And they received an award for this in 2002, right?
Yes, they received the award Wohnen mit Kind, Living with Children, by the state of Baden-Württemberg. But unfortunately, they didn't receive explicit recognition from the city administration, which was especially sad for them because after this very long process and a lot of people saying they will never make it, they did it. That's also something Ingeborg Thor-Klauser mentioned.
Aber so diese Anerkennung dann, als es tatsächlich fertig war, ich glaube, viele haben gedacht, die schaffen das nie.
Did they also include energy and environmental planning?
They included environmental and energy planning in different aspects. One is that they reduced the underground car parking area by using double parking pallets. They have a green roof and used low pollutant materials. But most importantly, they have a low energy building standard, which is something that's also regulated by the law. But it's especially important for women, as we mentioned before. But let's also talk about intersectionality. While the majority of the flats are, for example, wheelchair accessible, intersectionality was not explicitly included in all of the structures.
After the funding expired, prices started rising. The higher prices mean the housing has become less inclusive and less accessible to people with different needs and incomes. Intersectionality is only applied selectively. In theory, the project supports multiple forms of inclusion, but in practice, some groups were not considered.
The project is still very important pioneering work, especially for the 90s. But when creating a similar project today, intersectional thinking has to be at the center.
Vivien, you also want to share an additional aspect which could be interesting for another project.
Yes, in the buildings of Modellprojekt Stadt und Frau, some of the owners are also still living there, but it's only about 40%. This is important because ownership can be a very important component for solidarity and participatory living. One way to do this is the Mietshäuser-Syndikat. The Mietshäuser-Syndikat is a German cooperative network that enables collective, non-profit ownership of housing to ensure permanently affordable, self-managed and anti-speculative living spaces. This idea is actually itself from Freiburg. And in Freiburg, there are almost 30 projects that are part of this Mietshäuser-Syndikat. That's even more than there are in Berlin. The money that's gained over a long time through this kind of ownership could also be invested into local energy transition. So there's also a possibility that this form of ownership could influence the energy transition.
Wow, Freiburg has really brought up a lot of cool projects and ideas.
Right.
Well, after this, we met up outside to reflect the impressions of the first 2 days. So the wrap up, the first day was great to cover some basics. Connection between topics clearer and observing all this with the lens of Freiburg, as well as the general overview of Germany. OK Institute was great for that, for example. Diving into numbers and comparative data gave me a clearer picture.
But there was also some critique mentioned, as there was not enough focus on intersectionality, and some structures were focused instead on first-wave feminism. Maxime shared his reflection and expectations for the next few days for the podcast as well.
I hope we will have more information and more training on particular topics of the relationship between gender and ecological transition, because it was very interesting. I hope it will be a bit more interactive in the coming days, but I'm very enthusiastic about the next activities in the planning.
And we also wondered about the bigger picture.
What political change is needed to encourage more projects to achieve the structural changes we need?
Especially during the first day of our trip, we felt that an intersectional approach was missing. Intersectionality is a complex but very important concept. So Irem, could you briefly explain what is meant by it?
Certainly I can. So intersectionality is a tool for studying, understanding and responding to the ways sex and gender intersect with other personal characteristics and identities, and how these intersections create unique experiences of discrimination. As Kimberly Crenshaw puts it in the 2019 publication, Reach Everyone on the Planet, by the Gunda Werner Institute, intersectionality is a lens through which you can see where power comes and collides, where it interlocks and intersects.
So intersectionality highlights that racism, sexism, class oppression, transphobia, ageism, and ableism can operate simultaneously and intersect, affecting the same person at the same time.
Yes, and in the context of energy, this matters because energy injustice don't affect everyone equally. And an intersectional lens shows that in Europe, single mothers and migrant women are disproportionately affected by the energy poverty. They are more likely to live in poorly insulated rental housing, spend a higher share of their income on energy, and have little power to access subsidies of influence renovation decisions. Another problem is that discussions and decisions around energy and climate often rely on a binary understanding of gender, which overlooks the realities and needs of many people. Here we speak most of the time of women, as much of the data and projects we discuss do. Nevertheless, it is important to recognize that patriarchal structures affect not only women, but also many others and contribute to the broader inequalities.
So as you can see, intersectionality is a complex and very important issue we'll return to in our second episode.
Cities are where the energy transition becomes part of everyday life. Not in abstract targets, but in how people move, feel safe, and use public space. And during our time in Freiburg, we had the opportunity to meet ICLEI gender mainstreaming team at their office, meeting Adriana Duarte, Simone Hasse, and Shreya Utarsh, and to speak directly with members of the network from Umeå in Sweden and Barcelona. What stood out was how clearly gender was framed as a central issue for the sustainable urban transformation.
ICLEI is a global network of local and regional governments working on sustainability, from climate mitigation and energy to mobility and urban resilience. Shreya Utkarsh explained why such a city-focused, local-level approach is helpful and necessary and where to begin this process.
ICLEI is a network for cities and regions, and the acronym is basically derived from 1990s, where it was an International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, and over time it has developed into local governments for sustainability as the main place for getting the cities to work on the topic of sustainability. I think it starts with awareness raising and starts with more people getting engaged in these topics as well. And also, I think it's relevant for it to be ground up. So how can actually cities and local governments support, because they have so much power. And as we talked about power quite a bit, it's really important that local governments that have the space and the necessity to actually protect its citizens do that job as well.
What was particularly striking in Freiburg was ICLEI's approach to gender. Gender is not treated as an additional layer or a separate policy field, but as something that fundamentally shapes how sustainability measures work or fail.
The team also explicitly introduced intersectionality, emphasizing that gender interacts with income, age, migration background, disability, and other factors. This perspective shaped the entire discussion and set ICLEI apart from many other organizations we met.
One of the ICLEI's key arguments is that cities are organized around daily routines, and these routines are gendered.
Women tend to make more trips per day than men and are more likely to travel on foot or by public transport. These trips often combine paid work with care work, shopping, and social responsibilities.
This means that women are among the most frequent users of urban space. As a result, urban planning decisions about transport, safety, accessibility, or lighting directly affect women's everyday lives and their ability to participate fully in the society.
This became very concrete in our conversation with Umeå, a city in northeast Sweden, represented by Laura Gustafsson.
Umeå approaches gender equality by explicitly analyzing power and responsibility. Laura emphasized that challenging existing power structure and privileges is just as important as introducing new technologies.
In the case of transport emissions, Umeå found that men, especially from higher income groups, were far more likely to use private cars, while women already relied more on public transport.
Instead of framing this as a neutral mobility issue, the city focused on changing the behavior of those groups contributing most to emissions. That connects gender analysis directly to climate effectiveness.
Another important example concerns safety in public space. Through participatory dialogues held before building infrastructures like bus stops, the city learned what people actually needed.
One clear outcome was the importance of lighting. Improving lighting significantly increased the feelings of safety and made public transport more accessible, showing how small, informed design choices can have large social and environmental effects.
A different but complementary approach came from the ICLEI member Barcelona, represented by Blai Marti.
Barcelona works with a strong gender and intersectional perspective in urban planning, using tools such as exploratory walks. These walks bring planners, experts, and residents together to observe how different people experience public spaces.
During these walks, attention is paid to visibility, lighting, building design, and the continuity of routes, all factors that influence whether people feel comfortable and safe moving through the city.
The city has also applied this perspective to projects such as the redesign of school surroundings and neighborhood spaces, considering the needs of caregivers, children, and elderly people.
What is important here is not just the physical outcome, but the method, making lived experience a legitimate source of planning knowledge. Adriana Duarte from the Freiburg office underlined how they were also able to learn from their members.
More than anything, I think the primary lesson is that these municipalities that are being really successful know that they have to go to the people. They're not waiting somebody to come to their building and say hello, and that's super important.
Across these examples, ICLEI highlighted that gender-inclusive urban planning is a process, not a single intervention.
This process typically includes defining planning rules, conducting preliminary gender considerations, preparing gender impact reports, collecting feedback, and only then moving towards approval and implementation. As Simone Rasset, who interestingly participated in a previous study trip, underlines, gender is a part of all projects, always.
We are also asked many times to have a gender strategy for the project, to consider this element during the whole duration of the project. So for example, we don't have like one specific activity and then maybe after 2 months, hop, that's done, we tick the box and we go to something else. And there is this monitoring aspect as well to make sure that it's something that is integrated.
Mentioned specifically was Barcelona's methodological booklet on gender impact reports, which is a concrete tool that helps institutionalize this approach, ensuring that gender considerations are systematically included rather than applied selectively.
All of this connects directly to the energy transition. Cities are major energy consumers, and urban mobility is a key source of emissions.
If cities are designed in ways that support sustainable mobility and account for real gendered patterns of use, they can reduce emissions while improving everyday life. In this sense, gender-inclusive urban planning is not only about social justice, it is also about effectiveness, resilience, and long-term sustainability. Wow, so much in just 2 days. I'm excited to hear from Federica, Rebecca, and Melina about their thoughts on what we've covered so far. We are asking Federica how she's feeling after our 2 days of the Freiburg adventure.
Now we're kind of through more than half of the week, and in Freiburg I feel like there were some common themes. And the first thing I really gathered was that no matter who it was, whether it was a research institute fighting to have more inclusive HR policies, or the Öko Institute who was speaking about gendered impact of transition policies, there was really a sense, or ICLE, there was really a sense that one is a pioneer and that they're fighting an uphill battle without any structural support. And I think even in the case of the Rieselfeld, the housing that was done specifically for mothers with children, there was no structural support at all. They were even having to fight those who wouldn't support them. They would actively obstruct them. And when you think about the topic overall, it's gender equality. It's a constitutional principle. It's wild to me that these women who were just looking to build better apartments had such lack of recognition and lack of support from the public structures around them. Another thing is that hard laws and things like official guidelines, official papers are really, really beneficial because they're sort of on an objective ground, and it makes it easier to refer to them, and it doesn't become this identity politics. I think the last thing I want to say is that potentially, and I think this is an open question where we don't really have a definitive answer, maybe gender is not the right focus, in the sense that gender minorities or women might not be the right target of these policies, because putting the focus on male behavior might have a bigger effect in the end. Like in Sweden, if you can offer women lots of public transport and alternative mobility ways, but if the men don't stop taking the car to work, then the emissions are not going to go down. And similarly, with the culture of the craftspeople, if men don't change their behavior, young women can only do as much to counter that. So sometimes I wonder if not only having to focus on women, but also being very clear about the responsibilities and the cause and effects of generally harmful but also polluting behavior might make it more effective. But yeah, it's an open question.
What about you, Melina?
We got to see a lot of different point of view of how gender and the energy transition intersect. But what really struck me is how every time the structure that we saw kind of depended on the public sector, public funding, or any kind of state intervention. And so that basically it really depends on political will to really push for a gender agenda in the energy transition. And so I thought that was a bit worrying. So yeah, that's kind of my take on the early part of the week, and so that's why I'm happy that we get more of the political sides now to see if the will is there.
And now Rebecca is sharing her reflections.
Yeah, we're now in between the two parts actually of the study trip. We left Freiburg, where we had 2 full days, even a bit more, of meetings and visits, and I think it was quite interesting. I hope that everyone learned new things, that they were inspired. We met with really different people with different perspectives. I mean, the problem always is that we have not so much time, so often it was maybe a bit frustrating and would have liked to have the opportunity to dive deeper in some topics, but that's kind of the game. In the first part We had rather local initiatives, maybe private initiatives, and so I hope that here in Strasbourg we will get a broader political perspective and maybe see how decision makers and also actors from the society, from private research institutes, from associations can intertwine to create a more systematic approach to our topic.
This first half of the week really showed us how connected the topics of energy and genders are. And even though it is still a niche, there are already initiatives thinking them together.
Thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to listen to what Lotta and Caterina will have to say about our 2 days in Strasbourg.
See you on the other side of the train.
Bye.
Bye-bye.